At the end of World War II, an American-controlled prison in Germany became notorious for its role in executing numerous former guards of Nazi concentration camps. This facility, often referred to as the Gallows of Dachau, was the site of several high-profile war crimes trials and executions. Among those executed were guards from Dachau, the first concentration camp established by the Nazis in 1933. Dachau became a symbol of Nazi terror and cruelty, with its operations marking the beginning of the regime's systematic persecution. Dachau was situated in Upper Bavaria, and over its 12 years of operation, imprisoned over 188,000 people, including political dissidents, Jews, Romani people, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. After the war, the American military used Dachau as a site for war crimes trials and the subsequent executions.
Let's unveil the secrets of time.
From Dachau to the gallows, the justified execution of Martin Weiss. Martin Gottfried Weiss was a notable figure among the guards. Born in Bavaria in June 1905, Weiss was raised Catholic and pursued mechanical engineering. He initially worked in the ironworks industry and later for an electric company. However, in the summer of 1926, he joined the Nazi Party as an early member. In April 1933, Weiss joined the SS and served as a guard at Dachau, which became a prototype for other Nazi concentration camps. The infamous slogan, "Arbeit macht frei," work sets you free, was inscribed at the camp's entrance. Dachau was the longest operating camp in Nazi Germany, imprisoning mainly German political prisoners initially. As the years passed, the number of inmates swelled, exceeding 188,000. The SS oversaw the camp's operations, using prisoners as forced labor for munitions production and camp expansion. The camp infrastructure included administrative buildings, barracks, a roll call square, and a notorious punishment block known for its brutality. SS guards, including Weiss, were instructed to treat prisoners as subhuman and were encouraged to be merciless. The punishment block at Dachau housed standing cells where prisoners were forced to stand for days without rest. Executions by hanging and shootings were commonplace, instilling fear among the prisoners. Weiss initially worked as an engineer at Dachau until February 1938, performing maintenance tasks before becoming an adjutant to the camp commanders, Hans Loritz and Alexander Piorkowski. In April 1940, Weiss was transferred to oversee the construction of the Neuengamme concentration camp near Hamburg, which began as a subcamp of Sachsenhausen. Neuengamme eventually became a full-fledged concentration camp where 106,000 prisoners passed through and approximately 43,000 died due to harsh conditions. As commandant, Weiss implemented policies of extermination through forced labor, leading to high mortality rates due to inhumane conditions, insufficient food, rampant disease, and scarce medical supplies. On September 1, 1942, Weiss returned to Dachau as commandant. Criticized for the deplorable conditions of the prisoners, he made some efforts to improve their situation, but continued to oversee large-scale killings. Weiss ordered hundreds of prisoners to be sent to Hartheim Castle, where they were euthanized. During his tenure, numerous prisoners were executed by hanging and firing squads. Weiss stated that the individuals who were shot dead were not prisoners of the Dachau concentration camp, but were instead prisoners of the Gestapo, who were the ones that issued the execution orders. He claimed that Himmler had sentenced these individuals to death. Some prisoners reportedly respected Martin Weiss, as he implemented some changes at the camp, such as allegedly banning deliberate beatings, allowing food parcels, and refusing Himmler's orders to bomb and burn Dachau. After his work there, he was appointed commandant of the Majdanek concentration camp, taking command on November 3, 1943. The next day, one of the worst massacres occurred, with over 70,000 Jews murdered in a single day. Some historians argue that Weiss was away preparing for his new role during the massacre. On his first day at Majdanek, he likely had to oversee a cleanup operation following the killings. In May 1944, he was promoted and later sent to the Mühldorf subcamp in November, where 2 underground plants were constructed to manufacture fighter planes using prisoners from Dachau. The Luftwaffe was suffering heavy losses, and inside these plants, they attempted to produce numerous aircraft for the war effort. Jewish prisoners working there were terrified of being gassed if they did not work hard enough. Many died due to the labor conditions and disease. Those unable to work were sent to Auschwitz to be killed. As the war was ending in April 1945, Martin Gottfried Weiss was possibly at Dachau to take over as commandant again. He was present during discussions about surrendering the camp to the Americans, but then fled. He was captured in Munich on April 29, 1945. Weiss was tried at the Dachau camp trials. The trial lasted from November 15 to December 13, 1945, ending with 40 convictions. Witnesses testified about the horrific treatment of prisoners. Martin Gottfried Weiss was found guilty of violating the laws and customs of war, having overseen several concentration camps where thousands died or were executed due to the conditions he enforced. Martin Weiss was sentenced to death for his war crimes and his role as commandant at Dachau and other camps. Martin Gottfried Weiss was executed on the same day as many of his former staff, who were also convicted war criminals. He was escorted from his cell at Landsberg by a large number of guards and military policemen to the courtyard, where his identity was confirmed by an official. A priest accompanied the group. Weiss was led up the gallows steps and handed over to the executioner. After offering a few last words, the executioner placed a black hood over Weiss's head, secured the noose, and released the trapdoor, causing Weiss to plunge to his death. His death was confirmed, and his body placed in a coffin. The butcher of Dachau deserved execution of Alexander Piorkowski. Alexander Piorkowski was born in Bremen, Germany, on October 11, 1904. As a young man, he worked as a mechanic and traveling merchant. After World War I, he was drawn to Nazi politics and joined the SA, the Brown Shirts, in June 1929. He joined the SS in June 1933 and was a member of the Nazi Party. He was seen as a reliable leader, earning command of the SS Standarte in Bremen. The following year, he led the SS Standarte Allenstein. Despite his involvement with the SS, he retired for health reasons on September 19, 1936, but was still regarded as a reliable SS member. Himmler approached him to become commandant of the Lichtenberg concentration camp, a position he held from July to December 1937, before it was converted to an all-female camp. Lichtenberg was housed in a former Renaissance castle in Prettin, near Wittenberg in Saxony, and operated by the SS from 1933 to 1939. The camp saw several commandants, including Theodor Eicke, who also commanded Dachau, and Hermann Baranowski, a senior guard at Dachau. Initially housing 2,000 male prisoners, Lichtenberg transitioned to an all-female camp in 1937, predating Ravensbrück. When Lichtenberg closed in May 1939, all female prisoners were transferred to Ravensbrück, which became the main female camp in the Third Reich. Lichtenberg became overcrowded over time, with insufficient food rations and disease spread. Alexander Piorkowski remained until August 1938, then transferred to Dachau, where he initially served as a Schutzhaftlagerführer, overseeing economic production at the camp. Piorkowski was a crucial administrator, known for mistreating prisoners and driving them to work harder for Nazi profit. He maintained order, conducted roll calls, and ensured compliance with camp rules. He was promoted to Commandant of Dachau, overseeing a large SS operation. Dachau, a colossal concentration camp, saw over 40,000 deaths. Many prisoners were priests. Before Piorkowski's arrival, many deaths had already occurred. Under his command, over 4,000 Soviet prisoners of war were executed at a nearby SS shooting range in Hebertshausen, starting November 25, 1941. During his tenure, the number of prisoners at Dachau increased significantly. The camp was heavily guarded to prevent escapes, with guards willing to shoot prisoners who attempted to flee. The camp was a site of terror under Piłkowski's leadership, employing horrific torture methods to instill fear. Standing cells confined inmates in tiny spaces for days. Flogging occurred publicly, and prisoners were hanged from trees or poles. Executions were common for those unable to work. As time went on, conditions at Dachau worsened, with many dying from disease, exhaustion, starvation, and violence. During Alexander Piłkowski's tenure as commandant of Dachau, conditions were so dire that some prisoners resorted to touching the electrified fence to end their suffering. Hundreds of priests were transported to Dachau, where many became subjects of horrific Nazi medical experiments. On August 31, 1943, Piłkowski was dismissed from his position due to corruption charges and embezzling money from the camp. This pattern of corruption was not uncommon among concentration camp commandants. After his dismissal, little is known about his activities until the end of World War II, when he was summoned by the US Army to stand trial for his crimes as commandant of Dachau. Piłkowski's trial took place from January 6 to January 17, 1947. As part of the Dachau trials, he was charged with crimes against humanity, including deportation, abduction, and mistreatment of prisoners. Witnesses testified against him, leading to his conviction and a death sentence. Despite multiple petitions for a pardon, Piłkowski was executed on October 22, 1948, at Landsberg Prison, a site where many Nazi war criminals were hanged after the war. On the morning of his execution, Piłkowski was escorted from his cell by US military police and a priest, led to the gallows and hanged. His body was placed in a coffin after death was confirmed. As commandant of Dachau, Piłkowski was responsible for the deaths of thousands, contributing to a reign of terror through brutal treatment and enforcing harsh conditions. While some debate exists about his level of direct involvement, as he often delegated responsibilities, his leadership nonetheless resulted in widespread atrocities. Death March to Liberation, the brutal fate of Dachau guards. Heinrich Wicker was born on June 30, 1921, in Bad Zwischenahn, Germany. As a teenager, he joined the Hitler Youth on September 9, 1933, where he and millions of other boys were trained for military service. They learned to use weapons and underwent military drills to prepare them for future service in Hitler's regime. Before his 16th birthday, Wicker joined the SS Totenkopfverbände, Death's Head units, the group responsible for staffing concentration camps. In November 1938, Wicker was stationed at Dachau. Young men like him were sent there to train as guards. With the outbreak of World War II, Wicker became part of the Waffen-SS, participating in the invasions of the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. He was later transferred to the Eastern Front for Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Wicker was wounded during the Battle of Demyansk and, deemed unfit for frontline duty, was reassigned. Wicker completed SS leadership courses, earning the rank of Obersturmführer. In June 1944, he was transferred to the Natzweiler Struthof concentration camp in occupied France, where he commanded a subcamp. Known for his brutality, he gained a fearsome reputation despite being only 23 years old. He became commandant of the Mannheim-Sandhofen subcamp in December 1944, benefiting from the reallocation of SS men to the front lines as Germany faced defeat. During his time at the subcamp, Wicker executed prisoners, including a Polish woman involved in sabotage. As the war drew to a close, he led death marches, forcing prisoners away from advancing Allied forces. On these marches, hundreds died from harsh conditions or were killed by Wicker's men. On April 28, 1945, he became the final commandant of Dachau. Wicker surrendered Dachau to General Henning Linden of the US 42nd Infantry Division on April 29, 1945. Under his command were 560 SS men, many of whom were later executed. When American soldiers liberated the camp, they found 39 railway cars filled with over 2,000 corpses and emaciated prisoners wandering the grounds. The liberators, shocked and appalled by the conditions, encountered resistance from some SS guards who continued firing. Accounts of the liberation include instances of retribution against SS guards and prisoners taking revenge. Regimental records indicate that around 30 to 50 German guards were killed during the liberation, with some prisoners also participating in reprisals against their former captors. This violence was driven by the horrific conditions and brutal treatment they had endured. A scene of chaos and revenge unfolded. One SS officer tried to push past the prisoners, but their courage grew as they knocked him to the ground. It was unclear whether the prisoners stomped on him or not, but he was killed in the struggle. Some American guards reportedly ignored the killings that occurred as prisoners sought retribution. Walenty Lenarchik, a prisoner at Dachau, described how, after the camp's liberation, prisoners rushed out to greet the Americans, lifting them onto their shoulders in celebration. Meanwhile, other prisoners captured the SS guards. Elsewhere in the camp, SS guards, capos and informers were severely beaten with fists, sticks and shovels. In one incident, American soldiers turned a blind eye as 2 prisoners beat a German guard to death with a shovel. Another soldier saw a prisoner stomping on an SS trooper's face until it was severely disfigured. The soldier commented to the prisoner, "You've got a lot of hate in your heart," and the prisoner simply nodded in agreement. Additionally, an American chaplain reported that 3 young Jewish men who had escaped the camp during the liberation confessed to beating to death a particularly cruel SS guard they found hiding in a barn, disguised as a peasant. An American doctor, 30-year-old Captain David Wilsey, penned a 7-page letter to his wife Emily describing the reprisals. Wilsey stated that he did not feel a single disturbed emotion at witnessing the killings of the Nazis, whom he saw as beasts who deserved to be slaughtered. "The Nazi guards so had it coming," Wilsey wrote. The first thing the liberated prisoners did, according to Wilsey, was kill the Nazi dog handlers and their dogs, who had brutally killed many prisoners. Wilsey himself engaged in torturing the SS soldiers, depicting in his letter how he poured icy cold water on them while they were forced to stand at attention for extended periods of time before being shot by the liberators. However, the SS guards were not the only casualties during the liberation. Lieutenant Colonel Sparks, a battalion commander of the 157th Infantry Regiment, 45th Infantry Division, wrote about an incident involving German prisoners of war. He observed approximately 50 German POWs, captured by his regiment, being held in a coal storage area. This area was partially enclosed by an L-shaped masonry wall about 8 feet, 2.4 meters high, and located next to a hospital. The prisoners were guarded by a machine gun team from Company Y. Sparks left the guards to head toward the center of the camp, where some SS members had not yet surrendered. He had only gone a short distance when he heard a soldier shout, "They're trying to get away!" followed by the sound of machine gun fire from the area he had just left. Rushing back, he found a 19-year-old soldier nicknamed Bird Eye, operating the machine gun. Bird Eye had killed about 12 prisoners and wounded several more. The soldier, crying hysterically, claimed that the prisoners had attempted to escape. Sparks expressed doubt about this explanation and replaced the gunner with an NCO before continuing toward the center of the camp. Sparks later stated,
"It was the foregoing incident which has given rise to wild claims in various publications that most, or all of the German prisoners captured at Dachau were executed. Nothing could be further from the truth. The total number of German guards killed at Dachau during that day most certainly did not exceed 50, with 30 probably being a more accurate figure. The regimental records for that date indicate that over 1,000 German prisoners were brought to the regimental collecting point. Since my task force was leading the regimental attack, almost all the prisoners were taken by the task force, including several hundred from Dachau."
Heinrich Wicker, the 23-year-old SS officer, was executed shortly after the camp's surrender. He had been tasked with handing over the camp to the Allies after the previous commandant fled, leaving him in charge of 500 guards. A final photograph shows him standing by a death train filled with corpses. Reports suggest Wicker was either beaten by prisoners or shot by American soldiers, as he was found dead with a gunshot wound and a battered face. Doctor of Death, Dr. Klaus Schilling's gruesome execution. Dr. Klaus Schilling was born in Munich on July 5, 1871. He pursued a medical degree, earning his doctorate at 24. He became a professor of parasitology at the University of Berlin and served on the Malaria Commission of the League of Nations. Schilling practiced medicine in German colonized areas of Africa, focusing on tropical medicine and malaria. In 1905, he became the first director of tropical medicine at the Robert Koch Institute, a position he held for over 30 years until his retirement in 1936. After Hitler's rise to power, Schilling moved to fascist Italy, conducting experiments on psychiatric patients to combat malaria affecting Mussolini's troops during the Italo-Ethiopian War. The Nazis rewarded Schilling for aiding their ally, providing financial support for his research. In 1941, Schilling returned to Germany and was allowed by Heinrich Himmler to continue his malaria research at Dachau concentration camp. At Dachau, Schilling conducted inhumane experiments. Prisoners were injected with synthetic drugs at various doses, some lethal, and then exposed to malaria by strapping mosquito cages to their arms. Over 1,000 prisoners were infected, resulting in 300 to 400 deaths and many others suffering lifelong effects. His experiments also claimed the lives of numerous priests held at Dachau. According to a testimony, the patients used in the malaria experiments were Poles, Russians, and Yugoslavs. Following Dachau's liberation, Schilling, then 73, was arrested and tried as a war criminal. Although not a Nazi Party or SS member, he was charged with war crimes, along with 39 other defendants at the Dachau trials. Schilling admitted to conducting the experiments, but claimed they were for scientific advancement. During his trial, Schilling made a plea in English. Breaking down in tears at the end, he pleaded with the court to let him finish his research, albeit in a less destructive manner.
I have worked out this great labor. It would be really a terrible loss if I could not finish this work. I don't ask you as a court, I ask you personally to do what you can. To do what you can to help me that I may finish this report. I need only a table and a chair and a typewriter. It would be an enormous help for science, for my colleagues, and a good part to rehabilitate myself.
Despite this effort, the tribunal sentenced Schilling to death by hanging on 13th December 1945. After his conviction, Schilling asked his lawyer not to appeal on his behalf, saying he would rather die than stay in prison. However, many in the German medical community protested on his behalf, calling him an honest and humane scientist. Nevertheless, Schilling's sentence was confirmed and his execution took place at Landsberg Prison in Landsberg am Lech on 28th of May 1946. When asked if he wanted to make a final statement, Schilling said,
I am not guilty, please, get it over with.